Hello everybody, I'm Rene Ramos, Director of the Lynn and Louis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives, and this is Rewind, the show that looks back on Florida's past with historic film and video. It's time for another trip back into the past, so sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of Rewind.
It's a whole new game for landlords in downtown Miami, according to store owners there. The name of the game is definitely not The Price is Right. Do laws protecting the rights of accused criminals go too far and hurt all the rest of us? And a look at Florida's new law on concealed weapons in cars. This is Montage. Hello, I'm Joe Abro. Inflation is not only making its mark on history, it's helping to destroy it right here in downtown Miami. Diana Gonzalez-DeRuthi reports on several businesses in the area that have had to move from their landmark locations because incredibly high rents have forced them out.
The Metro Sandwich Shop, a popular downtown lunch spot, had been on the corner of Northeast 1st Avenue and 2nd Street since 1942. But a few weeks ago, the owners, Ben and Chaim Friedmark, were forced to move their entire shop into what used to be the back dining room, because in November the building was sold to new owners, and their rent was nearly tripled.
The new people bought the building, and they paid a lot of money, and they said that they have to raise the rent. And they raised us, I cannot mention the amount because it's a lot of money, it's unbelievable. When we decided we cannot pay the rent, when we negotiate with them, and we ask them if we can take only a part, not the corner, because the corner is very expensive. We went through a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of aggravation, and it was not easy because when you stay in a place so many years, and you put in so much in this place, I put it in person, I put everything, my brother the same way, everything what we had, all the energy, from 4 o'clock in the morning to 7, 8 o'clock at night. And it was not easy decision. Take my word, the corner was my life.
The new Metro Sandwich Shop is much smaller, and it just doesn't have the atmosphere of the old open-air dining area on the corner. But not everything has changed. Chaim and Ben are still making their famous sandwiches. Bernie Soto was told when his lease was up, his rent would jump from $777 to $2,400 a month. Soto had bought the Seabold Barber Shop 14 years ago. It had been in the same spot in the arcade of the Seabold building for 60 years. But the rent hike forced him out of the store that had become a landmark.
Well, I was shocked to begin with, and I didn't know what to think, and knowing that I had to move out of the place, start looking for a different location, and I was thinking that it would hurt my business if I would go to a different address. So I started searching in the building and was very fortunate to find someone that would be willing to swap his shop for my shop, and at the same time absorb the rent that they were requiring.
So he moved his barbershop into a much smaller, more obscure, but affordable place in the Seabold's basement. Charlie Calloway, who has been working with Soto shining shoes for 20 years, moved downstairs with him, even though he has to keep his things out in the hall because there's no room inside the store. But 2 of Soto's barbers quit for fear the move would be bad for business. High rents have already driven some store owners out of the area completely, like Barnett's Office Supply, closed after 30 years in the same spot. The owners of the building are now asking for $5,000 a month for the space. They claim rent increases have not been sudden nor unreasonable.
I don't believe that the rents have been increased drastically. In a year's time, it has been a demand and supply type of situation throughout perhaps the last 3 years.
There was such a tremendous retail boom downtown back in, say, 79 and 80 that retail space was at a prime. It was turned out to be a tremendous demand situation where landlords were able to increase the rents dramatically, and you would still get many, many people clamoring for space. Some rates went up as much as 2 or 3 times usual rents.
1979 was one of the biggest years for downtown merchants. Close to 1 million tourists from Latin America came to Miami that year for one main reason: to shop. But things have changed since then.
What's happened now is the dollar has become much stronger over the past year. Consequently, the Argentinian peso and the Bolivar from Venezuela just doesn't have the buying power it used to. So tourists just aren't coming to shop as they did.
They're basing their rents on what existed 2-3 years ago, and you just can't do that.
The Miami Camera Shop has been in business for 22 years. When Albert Lebo started out, his rent was $450. It rose gradually over the years to $1,600. But when new owners acquired the building this year, it shot up to $5,000 a month. He fought it in court, and his lawyers are currently working on a settlement that would make some adjustments in the rent. Otherwise, Lebo would have had to move out.
It was impossible to remain in business. To pay $5,000 would have been an impossible situation. The business isn't here. The tourists are not coming the way they used to.
But investors were banking on a more prolonged boom period. So within a year's time, 700 new stores opened in downtown Miami. Everyone was trying to get a piece of the pie, but the slices were getting too thin. 10 months ago, Metro Mall opened in the old Richards department store. Last month, Southeast First National Bank of Miami filed a suit to foreclose on the property because the mortgage was in default. When the mall first opened, merchants were fighting for space here, not really concerned about the monthly rents, expecting big sales. When the profits didn't pour in, the rents became a concern. Some stores had to close, and the management made concessions so other tenants could afford to stay. So some adjustments were actually made in terms of the rent that was being paid by some of the tenants.
Well, I guess you could say that, but I think rather than, more so than just an adjustment or a change in the rent, that was coupled by giving them better locations within the mall.
The solution to the rent situation in downtown is something of a catch-22. If business continues to be slow, it's bad news for the merchants, although it would eventually force building owners to bring down the rents. But if sales go up, it will probably create a demand for retail space in the area, thereby pushing up monthly rents.
Well, summer is the season for tourists from Latin America, the downtown merchants' mainstay. So what happens in the next few months will probably set the rates for the next year or two. Public confidence in the criminal justice system is shaky at best. The greatest expectations come, of course, from those who have been wronged, the victims of crimes and their families, and they are the ones most often betrayed. Nancy Ross recently visited a South Miami couple whose efforts to prosecute the accused murderers of their children convinced them the present system of justice needs fixing.
In America's kindergartens, we're taught the alphabet and the Pledge of Allegiance. With all the sincerity 5-year-olds can manage, we put hands over hearts and recite liberty and justice for all. Most of us grow up repeating and believing those words, unless we ever have to tangle with the criminal justice system. John and Gail Hardiman, in their 20s and married less than a year, decided to celebrate a quiet New Year's weekend last January. On Friday, they left their Miami home for Brown's Farm, a popular hunting site just south of Belle Glade. By Sunday, they'd been murdered, shot with their own hunting pistols, and robbed of $32. It was a premature end for John and Gail, and just the beginning of a bizarre twist of justice and fate. John and Lisa Hardiman, the murdered boy's father and stepmother, related the events.
January 4, 1981, my son and daughter-in-law were murdered on a hunting trip in Belle Glade. After a week-long search with the help of many nice people, 2 brothers from North Miami were apprehended, brought before the Palm Beach grand jury, who charged them with 2 counts, first-degree murder, each one. Inasmuch as the appeal, for some cockeyed reason, is going to take a year, the judge released the one boy on $10,000 bond.
Indicted in the Hardiman murders are John and Cleo LaCroix, who were also hunting at Brown's farm with their parents. The boys are seen here among other volunteers involved in the search to locate the missing couple. According to police reports, the brothers acted suspiciously from the start.
And the LaCroix boys were the last to be seen that we know of with them alive. And this, of course, was fresh in our mind during the whole investigation. They stayed at the scene, came back to the scene, and made statements that just didn't fit.
And they did, in fact, come on the bodies.
Yes, they did, with the Game and Fish and one of our officers.
That's when the brothers were arrested, and that's when police questioning and the resulting legal cobweb began. Judge Carl Harper and a grand jury participated in pretrial hearings. One motion moved on was to suppress the confession of 17-year-old Cleo LaCroix, in which he took blame for the double murders. But an unusual police practice in Belglade at that time may keep the confession from ever being heard in the upcoming trial.
You have the right to remain silent. Do you understand, sir?
Yes.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Do you understand, sir?
Yes.
You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while you're being questioned. Do you understand, sir?
Yes.
Since the Miranda versus Arizona decision in 1966, it's required that before police can question a suspect, that person must be read certain rights, now called the Miranda warning. The person must understand that he has the right to remain silent, that any statement made can be used against him, and that he has a right to an attorney. If he can't afford a lawyer, the court must appoint one. It's the suspect's protection from police brutality and the old days of the third degree. Is there a standard Miranda card that's used in this state, a standard form?
Yes, there is, yes.
And what does that include?
That includes the 7 standard Miranda warnings that are given to the defendants. Our department, for years, since Miranda's, Arizona has used a standard card that we read each defendant and or suspect, and once he's read it, we have him sign it, which tells us that he fully understands it, and that becomes part of the criminal file.
And that there was a problem in this case and that there was an addition. Can you tell me what that addition was?
Well, back in, I believe in July of '77, there was a memorandum put out by then our lieutenant of detectives, and it was a guideline memorandum that he put out for all detectives in taking statements. Well, he also had a statement in there that they should state this also is being taken primarily to refresh your memory if and when this case goes to trial. And the court felt that this was misleading and took away from Miranda and suppressed those statements.
Was it ever questioned before the LaCroix case came up?
Never has been, no.
The statement in question was part of a policy memo created by then Deputy Lieutenant Richard Sheets, and Sheets distributed this memo without approval from his superiors. The statement was permanently deleted from policy guidelines as of June 1981. Verbal testimony is only half the burden of proof, and Judge Harper struck the prosecution another blow by throwing out more evidence, this time the murder weapons, which the LaCroix allegedly took to their North Miami home after the murder. A day after their arrest, police traveled with John LaCroix from Belglade to Miami to get the guns. In the car, LaCroix requested an attorney, and according to the judge's order, the officers should have turned the car around and headed back to Belglade.
He had already given a formal statement, told us where he had put the weapons, and were on their way to retrieve them. We got to the house, as the statement reads, told him exactly where to go in the living room and what drawer it would be in and how it would be covered up with certain papers.
Even though he wasn't asked?
Even though, no, this is it. I mean, he was saying it.
But an officer in the car at the time testified under oath that the group left Belglade for a then unknown destination, indicating that conversation in the car may have been in violation of LaCroix's rights.
They felt like they were obligated to recover those weapons after they had already been told where they were going to recover them.
Whether or not police investigators act in so-called good faith is at the heart of the legal controversy this case illustrates so well, walking the tightrope between protecting the Constitution and solving a crime.
The police are human beings. If it hadn't been for them, we may never have known where John and Gail were. We may never have found them, and that would be much worse.
Well, naturally, the police thought they were doing a good job, and I think they were doing a good job. It's just unfortunate that we have such weighted laws in favor of the criminal that the police anymore, they can hardly talk to a criminal. If he wants to confess, they're not supposed to listen, I guess.
My point is that, you know, a judge does not have to do his job perfectly in conducting a trial. He's only got to conduct a fair trial. And he's in a very serene atmosphere, a legal background, using many years and experience as a lawyer. And yet we take police officers who are on the street in the heat of battle and say, if you make a mistake in judgment and you make a minor error, then we will not allow this evidence to be used against the defendant.
Florida's exclusionary rule, setting new standards for what can and cannot be admitted into court, was brought up for change in the past session of the state legislature. The aim was to make Florida law on par with federal law, which now admits evidence when so-called good faith can be shown. But a last-minute lobbying effort by State Senator Dempsey Barron turned the vote around in a scramble for votes on other issues.
Unfortunately, what happened in the state Senate was that matter was bargained away to protect some senators' seats for reapportionment, probably to get some things they wanted in the appropriations bill and some things like that. I felt, and the governor felt very strongly, that that was an issue that was just too important to the law enforcement community, too important for public safety reasons in Florida to become a bargaining chit.
So as the law in Florida now stands, defense attorneys don't need to be concerned with whether or not the police investigators acted in good faith.
If it was good faith, and if you could count on the police operating in good faith in all situations, it really wouldn't be that bad. My experience has been, however, that the police often claim good faith, but in actuality, their motives are very hard to determine.
It's a very difficult thing. Each case or each defendant would be an individual, naturally. You may appeal to his good conscience. You may appeal to his religious aspect. If that's trickery, I don't know any other way to do it.
The question that remains is whether the Constitution was written with the foresight that some criminals would slip through the justice system, so the majority of us, law-abiding citizens, would remain free. LaCroix's attorney agrees this occasionally happens and can justify acting as counsel to an accused criminal.
If your question goes to how do you feel about representing people that might be guilty of crimes, I have no problem with that. The Constitution provides for a fair trial. It provides for defense counsel representing individuals that are accused of crime, and society, I believe, is benefited by defense attorneys representing individuals that might be innocent or might be guilty of the crimes they're accused of.
One segment of society doesn't seem to benefit from the current system, the victim of crime and their families. Ask about justice at the Hardiman home, where they still wait for a trial date to be set, where the Constitution has taken on a whole new meaning, and where it has been a very long and trying year.
My son and daughter-in-law, they didn't have so much as a traffic ticket, and yet everybody is going overboard to protect the rights of this criminal, this punk, these two punks. And I say that it's time that something should be done to change the law so that the law-abiding citizen starts to get a fair break.
Johnny and Gail had a right to their life. Someone came and took it away in the most horrendous way. They didn't ask them if they were through with it. The victims of violent crimes are brutalized twice, once by the criminal and once by the justice system.
Miami-Dade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be global. Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be investigative. Be a hero. What do you want to be? Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
Now what you're looking at is a .38 special revolver. It's commonly carried by police officers undercover, but it's also easily purchased in Dade County and carried by anyone who cares to. Recently, a gun bill was debated hotly in the legislature to allow one to carry a gun like this in your car, on your seat beside you in a glove compartment. and after many complaints by police and other people, it was vetoed by Governor Graham. A second bill was more quietly debated and was passed and signed by the governor, which allows you to carry a gun just like this as long as it's in a holster, snap holster like this. But as you can see, the difference is virtually non-existent. There's a hole in the end, and one all has to do is with your thumb flip the holster, and the gun can be fired from within the holster. So as you can see, a gun like this by your side in a car can be used as easily in its snapped holster, which is now legal as you could before without the holster. With me is Charles Intriago, who's president of the Florida Coalition to Halt Handgun Crime Incorporated. Mr. Intriago, what do you think of the difference between one bill is vetoed and this one which makes it legal to carry a gun like this?
It's a nonsensical difference that it's going to put the lives of our police officers at great risk.
Now, what are you trying to do with your coalition?
Well, our coalition is trying to bring some sanity to the handgun laws. We don't want to ban handguns. All we say is that those people who are ineligible to own handguns, such as convicted felons, illegal aliens, drug addicts, mentally defectives, should not be able to acquire them like they acquire a loaf of bread. And that prohibition on those categories of people has been in existence under federal law since 1968, but there's nothing done to verify it.
Now, let's make the record clear. You are a former federal prosecutor, so you're not... sometimes people associate people against handguns as never having been on the prosecutorial side of the law.
In fact, I like to cite J. Edgar Hoover, who was never accused of being an extremist leftist, as a person who advocated strong handgun measures during the course of his career.
And I think it's important for you to answer the question. You're not trying to take guns away from people.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. All we want to do is make sure that a person buying or receiving a handgun is not ineligible under existing federal law from acquiring it. That's all.
Now, I see here in some of your literature, you say that 91% of the American people surveyed in a Gallup poll said, here was the question, would you favor a law requiring a 21-day waiting period before a gun can be purchased to give authorities time to check to see if the prospective owner has a criminal record or has been in a mental institution? Now, 91% of the people asked that question said they would favor such a law, and yet we all know it's almost impossible to pass any kind of anti-handgun legislation. Why is that?
Well, I think the power of the pro-gun lobby and their admirable organization, by the way, over the last 40 years has been one of the reasons. Now the tide is turning. There's a group in Washington called Handgun Control Incorporated, which in the last 12 months has increased its membership by 1,100% and now has some 700,000 members. Our coalition, which has been in existence now for virtually a month only, has acquired already several hundred contributors and supporters throughout South Florida.
Now, you've told me a figure which is startling to me. First of all, in case you didn't know, in 1981, last year, 770 people were killed in Florida by handguns. And already in the first 90 days of this year, in Dade and Broward counties, please listen, 166 people have been murdered by handguns alone. That's an incredible, shocking statistic.
Well, the pernicious thing about a handgun, as you can see from the little one that you have there, is its concealability. It gives people swagger so that a punk can walk into a 7-Eleven and with a concealed weapon like this wreak havoc and incalculable human suffering.
Right.
That's why it should be treated differently than any other firearm. And our coalition, to emphasize, wants to do nothing with regard to long arms. The sportsmen and the gun collectors should not be affected. We want to keep those handguns away from criminals and mentally defectives.
How can people get in touch with your coalition if they agree?
Well, they can write to us at 700 Brickell Avenue, Suite 800, Miami, or they can call us at 443-4442. We need public support and we invite it.
Okay, Charles Intriago, thank you very much. Let me leave you with the sight of this .38 Special and show you how it fits in my inside pocket without a holster very easily. We'll be right back.
Miami-Dade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be global. Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be investigative. Be a hero. What do you want to be? Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
2 weeks ago, we reported on the dilemma of infertility, a problem that affects 15% of all married couples. We have received numerous phone calls from our viewers requesting more information. An organization called Resolve, which was also mentioned in our report, can answer any questions. It also offers counseling and referral services. The number in Dade County is 251-0270. Again in Dade, 251-0270. In Broward, the number is 741-5419. Broward, 741-5419. One of the most difficult problems faced by school systems is desegregation, correcting racial imbalance in schools caused by the fact that most neighborhoods are still segregated. Next week on Montage, we'll report on an innovative approach that Broward County is using. It's called magnet schools, schools that offer educational programs so attractive that students from all over the county voluntarily transfer there. Also next week, my guest says he'll tell us everything our insurance companies didn't want us to know. That's our Montage for this week. I'm Joe April.
That's about it for this edition of Rewind. Just time to remind you that Rewind features historical film and video from the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives. To see more from the Wolfson Archives collections, visit our website, wolfsonarchives.org. You can search the archives catalog and watch video online. And be sure to connect to our YouTube channel, where you will find hundreds of carefully curated clips, or link to the Wolfson Archives Facebook page to keep up with our busy calendar of historical happenings. Until next time, I'm Rene Ramos. Thanks for watching.